Hi, welcome to another episode with Lattice Training. Today I'm going to show you how to write a training program. So writing a training plan can be broken down into 3 simple steps I'm going to go through. So step 1 is the before and after. So where are you right now and where do you want to be? So there's a couple of ways of measuring the before and after. One is grades. So you can use benchmark grades or climbing at the same crag or at the same climbing wall to see if you've improved by going up the grades. So the second one, which you guys will know we love, is testing. So that is using some basic exercises to test yourself at the beginning of the training intervention or the training plan and at the end of it. If you've improved, then the training plan has worked. If you haven't improved, then you need to adapt it slightly differently in the future. So a third method is movement. So this might not be particularly reflected by grades alone, but it does show that you have got better and it's something that you can put into your plan and work on. So if you can climb up a steep climbing wall by jumping and cutting loose, and you want to improve your technique of keeping body tension, a good way to see improvement is being able to repeat the same problems that you've done before, but keeping your feet on the whole way and using different techniques. That shows that you've increased your skill and you've improved as a climber overall. So as you can see by my amazing drawing here, is the key thing with this whole before and after is you want to know where you are now and where you want to be. What kind of climber do you want to be after the training plan? So you can use those different metrics I talked before about understanding about how to improve. So that might be a grade going from V5 to 7. It could be improving your finger strength from hanging with plus 20 kilos to plus 28 kilos. And it could be that you couldn't dyno before and you want to become more dynamic. So what kind of climber do you want to be at the end of this training plan? And that's going to help us determine what to do next. So step 2, we're going to look at the time scale of the plan. And this is going to help us look at the big picture elements of it and the macro cycle. So a macro cycle is usually referred to in sport as a big plan which lasts usually a year to 4 years, depending on what type of sport you do. In this context, we can look at it going from the before to the after. And we're going to be looking at several months of training. So a month is usually classed as a mesocycle. So by knowing the before and after about where we want to get, we can decide on the time scale. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of guesswork regarding this, but I would suggest that the more experienced you are at training and the longer you've been climbing, the longer it takes to make improvements in the desired way if you're already well trained. If you're newer to training, you can expect to see gains a lot quicker. So another determinant of time scale is the gains that you've got to make. If I'm going from 7A to 9A, it's going to take several years. If I'm trying to improve my finger strength a small amount just to get ready for the outdoor season, then the before and after can be a lot quicker and I'm going to be able to do that in a shorter time period. So the last determinant is the priority of this training. So how does it fit into your overall climbing? How does it fit into your life? How much time do you have? And what elements of the before and after do you need to prioritize to achieve your goal? So to give you some examples, if we go through the seasons of performance, if I know that my goal route or goal problem outdoors comes into condition in autumn and we're currently in spring, I've got 6 months to work with. So my before and after needs to try and fit into that 6-month period. If we're looking at the gains that I've got to make in this time period, if I've got a very crimpy route that I want to do, and I know that's something I struggle with where I'm on really small holds, then that's the gains that I need to try and improve on. And I can start measuring this either by doing finger strength testing or by slowly increasing the load in training and measuring it week on week. So making sure that I can see that the training is working and I can adapt the training if the gains aren't coming. Just remember to take it nice and slow whenever you do something like this and look for small increments of gains because we've got 6 months to work with. I know how crimpy the route is and there's no point trying to make those gains within 3 months because that's going to happen too quickly and are more likely to upset the training plan. So the last one, looking at priority, is I know right now that I've got a lot of time to train and I'm going to really focus on my base training. At the end, I really want to do this route, so that peak performance, that is the priority at that part of my training plan. However, it's really good to highlight the obstacles that are in the way, whether they are good or bad. So for instance, in the middle of the summer, I might have a really busy work period. So rather than trying to just plow through that and ignore it, I'm going to make sure that I know that from the start and put it into the timescale. Towards the end of the summer, when it's starting to get really good conditions and nice weather for sea cliff climbing, I'm going to make sure that that's what I want to be doing. So I'm going to take that into account and make sure I work around that in the timescale from the very start. If you followed everything up until now, you have a really good picture of the before and after, where you are now and where you'd like to be. You should also have an idea of the time scale of that, so what gains you've got to make and when you would like to perform. Now we're going to be looking at how to order your training and the movements and sessions that you might want to include and how you actually choose those. So to work out what training sessions I'm going to do, I'm going to use that before and after picture to determine what is most important to have in my training plan. So the after picture might be looking at the goal route or the type of climber I want to be at the end of the training plan. So for me, this might be a goal route that is quite steep. It has a short sequence, crux sequence. It's very crimpy and involves a lot of body tension. Because I've already measured those metrics, or I've asked my friends for some guidance on what they think I'm good and bad at, or I've looked at other problems or routes I've already climbed, I can see that I'm particularly good at body tension and steep climbing compared to my goal. But actually for short, hard sequences, I tend to power out. And for crimpy routes, I really struggle with smaller holds. So it doesn't need to be completely accurate or detailed at this stage, but it gives you an idea about the priorities of the things you want in your training sessions. So now we need to determine how many sessions I actually have available. So I know that if I did structured climbing every time that I have an opportunity, I'm going to feel a little bit burnt out and demotivated after several weeks and months of training. That's for me personally, and it's one thing to really consider when you're determining your training plan. So I'm going to make sure that I have at least one open session a week to either get outdoors or to just do any sort of projecting that I want to do indoors with friends in a relaxed format. That means that I'm quite happy to do 3 more structured training sessions per week that are climbing based. And I don't mind doing 2 extra conditioning sessions per week on top of that. These can be combined, but it means that I've got the maximum limit on the amount that I'm able to do. It's really easy to start trying to make your plan before you're determining what's the maximum amount of time that you have available and what's realistic for your motivation. So now I know how many training sessions I have to work with, I can start planning them around the facilities that I have in use. And that means that I can really start to focus on the movements that I have available to me, the type of sessions I might have, and then the ordering of these sessions as well throughout the training plan. So like I said before, I'm going to have 1 open session a week to go outdoors or just have fun. I'm going to have 1 session a week at the climbing facility here at the lockup, which is the Lattice climbing wall. I'm going to have another session here in the day before work, but then I'm going to do my conditioning at home. So on the second session, I might do the climbing and conditioning together, both at the facility. On the third session, I'm going to split it between conditioning and home. So I'm going to have less equipment available here. The 4th session, I'm lucky enough to have a little home board and a fingerboard set up, and I'd like to have that 4th session at home. So I'm going to do my conditioning that I do and my training at home. So I'm going to make sure that I do all of it there. So now I know what type of climbing I have available and what conditioning equipment I have available for that amount of sessions. Now you know what facilities you have available, I want to know how much time and energy I have towards that. And this is something that's really important, I think gets missed off a lot, is we often sort of say, I'll do 4 training sessions a week, but you might want to adjust the amount of training that's done in each session, depending on how much recovery time you have and how many life demands you have throughout the week. So for example, in session 1, it's an open session where I might get outdoors depending on the weather. I really want to prioritize this. It's a big motivator for me and I want to make sure I have good skin. So I'm going to make sure I have a rest day before this, and that is a priority. The second session I've said is going to be at a climbing facility. So I want that to be a big day and have a lot of focus on it, and I want to make sure I have a lot of energy for that training session. So one thing that makes a big difference for me is training with someone else. So I'm going to make sure that that day is prioritized to be training with a climbing partner. So I'm going to work around their schedule a little bit, but I'm also going to make sure that I'm trying to optimize that time that I'm going to spend with a lot of energy. So ideally, again, I'll have a rest day before and I'll try and do it with a training partner. So the third session, I'm going to do a split day because I know this works around my work schedule. I'm going to do some climbing in the morning, then I'm going to work throughout the day, and then do some conditioning in the evening. I know that conditioning in the evening's got to be relatively low intensity or low volume because I'm going to be relatively tired and I might not feel completely up for doing a really, really long session because I'm doing it at home as well. The session in the morning I'll have a lot of energy for, but once again, I know that I've got a big day of work ahead of me, so I don't want the volume to go on for too long or have too long of a period because I'll be thinking about work afterwards. So I'm taking that into account, and it means the sessions that I choose are going to be based on that. And the fourth and final session is going to be a nice and simple session on the board at home with some fingerboarding. I have those facilities available to me. It's something I really enjoy doing with the people I live with, and it's something that I want to prioritize, but going to once again keep it relatively short, and it's going to be high energy but not too much volume because of the angle of the board and the facilities I have available. So I know that I'm going to have an intense session on this day. So now you know what facilities and time you have available, also what you need to train. Sometimes it's really easy for climbers to start choosing what sessions they want to start doing, and they start seeing things that are quite cool online that they'd like to try out, which is a great way to experiment. However, it's much better to work from your schedule first and then go to the sessions afterwards, so you know realistically what you can fit in. So based on that set of facilities and the schedule that I've got available, I can start to fill in the bigger picture gaps before I choose the exact details of the session. So obviously on the open session, that's going to stay open. On the second session, it's going to be a really long day. And because I'm trying to prioritize my crimp strength, and it's something that I need to improve on shorter sequences, I'm going to keep it really focused. So I'm going to do finger strength into some strength-based climbing. So this might be either more fingery climbing or it might be fingerboarding, and I can choose this later, so the details later. I need some more strength-based climbing, so I'm going to do a bit more volume on probably slightly more finger-friendly holds, but it's going to work my body quite hard. And now I'm going to do some full body conditioning because we've got some weights available and I've got a partner to motivate me to make sure that I'm really psyched. So the third day, I'm going to do a split session like I said. In the morning, I don't really like doing intense training, so I'm going to do really easy aerobic capacity training, so nice endurance work. There's going to be very little interference effect to the priority of the strength gains because I'm doing it on a separate day, even though you can combine them. I'm going to do it nice and easy in the morning before work, and that's going to help me get through a working day sitting at a desk. In the evening, I'm going to be doing conditioning at home. So I'm going to do some kind of pulling exercise and some flexibility. I don't often like doing loads of core training at home. I find it quite demotivating. So I've taken that into account from the very start. I'm going to make sure that I'm not forcing myself into that. So the fourth session is going to be at home. So we've got a really nice home setup, and it's something that I really enjoy using. I'm going to focus on finger strength and strength again. And this once again can be climbing based or a little bit of a mixture of fingerboarding and climbing. So now I've got the list of sessions that I want. I've chosen that based on looking at the before and after picture and the priority of crimp strength, steep climbing and shorter, more strength-based sequences. And I've also looked at the facilities, the time scale that I have and my schedule. So now I've got to break this down into a week and try and make a training plan out of it and make sure that I'm making the most of my time. So now we're at the point where we've got a working training week. So as you can see below, this is day 1 to 7. And I've built this out by planning out the open session first and making sure, because it's probably going to be on the weekend, that I put that in at the very start. So then that I know that I'm going to have a rest day before it, that's something that was a prerequisite. As I'm going to try and go outside, I know that I often feel quite tired and my skin tends to be quite sore after this day. So I'm going to have a rest day after it as well. At the start of the week, you could add in the big session here, so that really big day training with a partner. However, sometimes after having like a rest period, I do tend to find that it's quite nice to have a more intense training session at home, and that's something I can do in the evening later on. This is something I take into account. It's a personal preference, but it's really good to plan this in. After that, I'm going to have a big rest day, and then I'm going to have the really big training day. So I'm going to really push myself on this day and make sure that I'm going to feel rested, recovered. It's halfway through the week and I've got a training partner ready for that. On the third day is going to be the split day, so it should be nice and easy. It's going to help with a bit of active recovery, and I'm going to keep the intensity really low and then do some conditioning in the evening, which once again, the volume's nice and low before the rest day and going outside again. Now that I know the structure of the week and I've got the type of sessions I want to do, I know that I'm going to do a bit of fingerboarding for that finger strength work and some board climbing. And that's some choices that I've made based on trying to improve at shorter sequences and improving my finger strength and crimpy climbing. On the second session, I'm going to do some fingery climbing on a board, and then I'm going to do some more mileage-based bouldering. So we can do it on some bigger holes, like I said, working on full body movements and body tension, because I still need to improve at body tension towards my after position and that goal. Then I'm going to do some full body weights to make sure that I'm assisting that as best as possible. The third session, nice and easy, one on, one off. That session I really enjoy doing. It's going to work my base endurance, active recovery, and really help me improve as an overall climber. Then in the evening, I'm going to do pull-ups and stretching. Once again, that's going to be nice, simple at home. It's something that I don't think will affect my open session on the weekend, and it's a good thing to add in as a stimulus because my goal route requires that. So now you've got a basic training week, there's a few things I'd like you to consider before starting. One is how much can your fingers take? This is usually the most injured part of a climber, and it's something that we see quite a lot, and I think a lot of people don't take this into account as easy as they could. So for me personally, I know that if I do too much board climbing and fingerboarding, it really starts to affect the health of my fingers. So I've got to put an upper limit on that. It does take a bit of experimentation to find it, but always try and play it safe and build up slowly. So when you make your weekly plan, consider that. Two is too much of the same thing. So we're looking at the movements that you're training, and I think a lot of people forget that if you do too much of the same movement, you'll get really good at that specific movement, but it won't translate across all climbing styles. For instance, too much time on a 45 board is not going to help you on vertical British limestone. Too much time doing pull-ups isn't necessarily going to mean that you've got much better body tension. So try and make sure the variety of movements is always considered. Three is realistic time. And this is something that I remind every person I've ever worked with before beginning, is I'd rather you be realistic and have extra open climbing time where it's unstructured than try to structure too much and presume you've got more time available and fail to achieve that. Open climbing time is equally important if you are trying to build a skill base and you're trying to enjoy your climbing, if that's something that motivates you. So play it safe and add in open climbing time if you have extra. And four is looking at psych. So what psych and motivation do you have before training? Do choose sessions that you really enjoy and it'll make a massive difference to your performance. A lot of us all hate flexibility and core, but try and choose the core sessions or flexibility sessions that you most enjoy and mean you're consistent. If you've got an endurance session that you really hate, even if you think it's going to make a big difference for you, it's always worth cycling it in and out with something more enjoyable, or just trying to find a better replacement so that you go into it and you give it loads of motivation and focus. So the slight elephant in the room that I've not addressed is periodization. So we've now got a time scale, a before and after, and a relatively broken down training week where you should be able to start planning out the sessions that you need to do in order to achieve your goal. So in how to periodize your training plan, which is a method that we use at Lattice, is some basic principles is to make sure that you have rest periods regularly throughout the training plan. So we use either a 3 weeks training, 1 week off, 4 weeks on, or 1 week off as a really basic format to make sure that you have a rest week which is reduced load compared to the other training weeks. It doesn't mean you have to do nothing, but it does mean that it gives your body time to catch up with all of the training effects you've done before. So the next element is looking at the specificity of the training throughout the plan. So once again, if we use like a 6-month period, towards the end of the training plan, you want to become more and more specific towards your goal. If you've got a particular route or climbing style you'd like to get better at, you can be looking at trying to perform at a high intensity at that specific style, or making sure that your training is in line with that goal. If you've got a more broad training goal, then you can stay more broad across the training plan. But once again, I'd still prioritize projecting and doing harder climbing towards the end of the training period. So the last element that we take into account of periodization with people with the most complicated plans or nice simple plans is the volume and intensity ratio. So most of the time we focus on increasing the volume and having a moderate to low intensity at the beginning of training plans. This is the same even for boulder specialists. They'll still be doing a high volume of climbing compared to just project bouldering, but doing slightly easier boulders. It doesn't mean they're completely easy, but the volume is still there and a little bit higher. As you progress throughout the plan, the intensity should increase and become more and more specific. And then you can start to reduce the volume because you want to recover better and increase the intensity each session so you get better and better at that maximum effort. So that is a really, really basic format and 3 different elements of periodization that we take into account with all plans. So it doesn't need to be much more complicated than that, but if you are really into it and you would like to create a more complicated structure, it's worth looking into it and doing a lot of research before deciding. So hopefully that is 3 simple steps on how to write a training plan. It's really hard not to get more complicated than that on video, but if you want to make sure that you're just creating a nice simple structure to stick with that works for you as a person, there's 3 simple steps that really, really help. And we still take that into account whenever we write any climber's training plan here at Lattice.